Good morning and welcome to Trees for Tomorrow and our Wisconsin Newspaper Association Memorial Pylon ceremony. My name is Mike Mathis. I am the MC for this morning's ceremony. I am the publisher of the Tri-County News in Kiel, Wisconsin, a job I've held for about 30 years and just starting to figure it out. I'll be with you this morning, and we make this a very informal ceremony this morning. We have some things to share about the publishers who are being enshrined on our pylon. And believe me, the families that are here have a lot more stories to tell than we could ever collect and assemble. So as we honor each pylon enshrinee, we will welcome any members of family that are moved by the Spirit to come and share stories. They could be serious, they could be humorous, they could be anywhere in between. Wisconsin Newspaper Association has had an affiliation with Trees for Tomorrow that dates back to the late 1940s. And in the early 50s, we purchased a tract of land here that we still allow Trees for Tomorrow to use for educational purposes. They manage the forest for us, and it's a great resource in teaching about the renewable resource that really is at the foundation of our industry. Without paper, without the trees that produce our paper, we would have been digital a long time before digital was popular. For many years, the members of the association would come up, and the early retreats that took place here, publishers and families would come up and actually work in the pressed forest. Apparently that kind of labor subsided over the years, became more of a retreat and a gathering. It kind of became an old boys club gathering for a while. Golf and cards were played, things like that. But back in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, we had kind of a change of venue. We welcomed the ladies to be part of the things that were going on here. My friend and fellow publisher from Lodi, Bill Haupt, was one who was instrumental in changing the tone of Trees to an educational programming weekend. And we brought publishers from all over the state here to learn more about our industry and to network and to share, to help each other grow, because so many of us in our realm as publishers are the only ones in our community that have the issues that we deal with, and we need to hear from each other, learn from each other, and grow from each other. The Memorial Pylon began in 1962, and for those of you who have been here before, remember it as a series of wooden plaques that migrated here from the pressed forest. It was originally started in the pressed forest. There were some vandalism issues out there, and they brought the Memorial Pylon onto the Trees grounds so that families could come and remember those who published papers in Wisconsin enshrined on that pylon. The names were engraved on old press plates, and as you know, the photosensitive press plates over time became very photosensitive to the sunshine. And so a few years back, with the help of several volunteers from the organization, we decided it was time to raise funds and make this a more permanent memorial to the publishers who have served the communities of our state. We are just thrilled to see this permanent opportunity here for these names, and the ones that you see on this side are obvious to you. When you take a walk around behind, you'll see even more names that have been added to the pylon over the years. To be enshrined on the pylon, you must have been a Wisconsin publisher or a significant contributor to the newspaper industry in the state of Wisconsin. And people are enshrined by the year in which they passed or were honored. And this year we have, I believe, 9 names that we are going to add today. So we'll get that started. But I'd also like to give you a little context. As we sit here, you look above me, you can get past this shiny crown of mine, and you'll see these tall, tall trees here. These tall, tall trees, to me, remind me of these publishers who lived out their lives in their communities. Not one publisher on this shrine is perfect. You see, God didn't send perfect people to publish newspapers. He knew that they had to serve communities of imperfection and communities of difference. And in serving these communities, our publishers put forth their very best efforts to not only grow their newspaper business, but there isn't a publisher on these stone walls that didn't understand the connection between a successful newspaper, and a successful community. You will hear stories today of lives that were changed by the publishing business, but also lives that had an impact on the communities in which these publishers lived and worked, often serving on boards and panels and fundraising efforts, doing anything they could in their presence and power to make their community a better place for people to live and do business. We're connected. This is the Wisconsin Newspaper Association because we do similar work, and we have done similar work in our communities, like these tall timbers that we honor on our shrine. But really, I would like to say this is the Wisconsin Newspaper Association family. And today we gather as family to honor people that have been respected leaders in our industry and have contributed greatly to the economy and the well-being of our Wisconsin communities. Our first enshrinee today is Mollyann Emerson. Mollyann Emerson was born in September of 1942 in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. She was born to Clarence and Gertrude Schutte Bushkoff. She graduated from Beaver Dam High School in 1960 and went on to earn her LPN degree from MATC Nursing School. She worked for several years with emotionally disturbed children at the Wisconsin Diagnostic Center. And then in September of 1964, she married Richard Dick Emerson at Trinity Methodist Church in Beaver Dam. In 1966, they moved from Madison to Deforest, and after the birth of their first son, Scott, in 1966, she became a full-time mother and did book work at the Deforest Times Publishing Company. In 1968, she gave birth to a second son, James, and then joined with her husband, Dick, to publish the Deforest Times-Tribune. They published the weekly newspaper and a shopper for 30 years, and eventually they added to their family of newspapers by purchasing the Poinet Press, which they also published for several years. After selling the newspapers, Mollyann worked for the Head Start programs in Deforest and Sun Prairie, and later as a substitute aide in the Deforest School District. She was a member of Christ Lutheran Church, where she enjoyed Sunday worship and services, and the Wine, Women, and Word meetings. She enjoyed ushering and served as a confirmation mentor. She volunteered for Bethel Sales Group in Madison and Beaver Dam Lake Improvement Association. She also attended every school sporting event and program that her granddaughters, Kaya and Isabel, participated in. Molly passed from life to life in December of 2017 at UW Hospital. She's survived by her husband, Dick, of 53 years, 2 sons and their families, Scott, Jana, and Kaya, James, Ann, and Isabel. Molly knows about this shrine. She attended here with Dick for many, many years and was a tremendous friend to all of us who attended at Trees and learned from each other. At this time, I would welcome a member of the family to come forward. If anyone from the Emerson family has a word to say or share with us, please come up at this time.
When we first took over ownership of the Deforest Times, this was a stag outing. Only men were allowed. This did not go very well with Molly, but we stayed home. But after about 3 or 4 years, they invited the women in, and she came to every Trees. She has a lot of friends up here. We had a lot of good times.
Thank you, Dick. Anyone else from Mollyann's family wish to share with us? All right, then we will move on. And you have a thing you want to record with? We're doing distance connections here today from Trees. I think this is a live feed that we are sending off to your sister. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. What's your sister's name?
Carol.
Carol? So we welcome you, Carol, from a distance. Our next enshrinee is Helen V. Everson from the Edgerton Reporter. Helen Everson was born on August 16, 1919, in a sod house on a ranch in northwest South Dakota. She was born to Herbert T. and Marie Euchre Oliver. Helen developed her work ethic as a young girl, growing up on the ranch near Lemon, South Dakota. From the age of 5, she rode horseback for 2 miles to attend a country school. She worked for her room and board while attending Lemon High School, where she graduated in 1936 at the age of 16. After graduating from a business school, she was hired as secretary at ACE Buick in Madison. She was just 22 years old, and she was already the secretary-treasurer of the company, and that included dealerships in Hibbing, Minnesota, and St. Paul. Helen met the love of her life, Harlan Everson, at a soapbox derby in Madison, and they were married in 1949. 2 years later, they bought the Edgerton Reporter. Helen, you see, was the face of the newspaper for many years, and especially during that time when her husband Harlan spent 12 years at the state capitol as a legislator, starting in 1970. After Harlan passed in 1992, Helen continued to manage the paper, leading it to earn numerous state and national awards, including the top award from the Wisconsin Newspaper Association for General Excellence in its circulation category in 2006. In 1978, Helen's daughter, Diane, joined the newspaper, eventually becoming the paper's publisher, editor, and advertising manager. Helen passed from our midst in November of 2017 at her home in Edgerton. She was still young at 98 years old. She's survived by her daughters, Diane from Edgerton, and her daughter, Carol, and husband, Steve Ittrey Everson, Franklin, Wisconsin, 2 grandsons, Eric and Tyler Ittrey, nieces and nephews, extended family and friends. She was a second mother to Peggy Luther, Zellen Kiernes, Janet Ewald, and Doug Peterson. And she was also blessed with loving caregivers in her later years. In addition to her husband, she was preceded in death by her parents, sisters, and brother. It is our privilege today to enshrine Helen Everson on the WNA Pylon, and I would ask Diane to come forward.
I'm not usually at a loss for words, but today I am. My mother was very small in size, but huge in character and contributions to her community. And she, for example, took a failing festival that was in the red and turned it into the black, and it's now still a thriving festival in our community. She did things behind the scenes, and there were always something happening where people were coming in to thank her. I remember one day a couple came in with a huge turkey, and it's because their mother had come in to renew her subscription, and my mother thought she didn't look well. And so after a while she got in the car and drove to where she lived in the country, and the woman's car was in the ditch because she had collapsed, and got the ambulance and saved her life. So that's the kind of thing that happened numerous times. She also had a lead foot, and we called her a heat-seeking missile. The police would stop her, and they didn't have the heart to give her a ticket. They said, "Mrs. Everson, you just got to slow down." And she often commented that the police take all the joy out of driving. I'm very touched by the ceremony, and by the friendship of all the people here and all the ones that knew my mother so well and came up to me at the convention. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, from Carol too. Thank you.
Our next enshrinee is Bernadette Ann Friedell of the Washburn County Register. Bernadette Friedell was born April 1st, 1926, no fooling, in Stoughton, Wisconsin, to George and Rosella Lee Forsyth. She married John Friedell on June 21st, 1947, in Edgerton, Wisconsin. Bernadette earned her journalism degree from UW-Madison in 1948, and then from 1980 to 1989, she and John edited and published the Shell Lake Washburn County Register. After earning several awards from the Wisconsin Newspaper Association, they sold the paper and retired in 1989. And in her retirement, Bernadette was active with the Washburn County Genealogical Society, writing poetry and short stories, gardening, and spending time with her family. Bernadette passed away on April 3rd, 2018 in her home at the age of 92. She's survived by her son, John Jr. of Shell Lake, a daughter, Robin Francis of Trago, Wisconsin, husband, Michael, 2 granddaughters, 3 great-grandchildren, a sister, and many nieces, nephews, and friends. She was preceded in death by her husband, John, her daughter, Deborah, her brother, Paul, and her parents. It is indeed our privilege to enshrine Bernadette Ann Friedell on the pylon for WNA today. Is there any member of the Friedell family with us today? Our next enshrinee, and it is a pair, a husband and wife pair, Donald W. and Gail Twining Griswold of the West Salem Journal. Donald Griswold was born on August 6, 1914 at the family farm in West Salem. His parents were Harry W. Griswold and Mary Bailey Griswold. A little less than a few years later, Gail Griswold was born to Robert F. and Margaret Twining in Sparta, just up the road. Donald and Gail both attended West Salem High School, graduating in 1932 and 1942, respectively. They were married September 13, 1946, in La Crosse. Donald attended and graduated from UW-Madison School of Journalism in 1937. And after college, he worked as a reporter for the Nonpareil Journal, where he had been an unpaid cub reporter at 16 years old. In 1941, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and upon his return in 1945, purchased the newspaper, renaming it the West Salem Journal. A letter from his son, Harry Griswold, tells an interesting story. My dad was a well-paid officer in the Aleutian Islands, where there is nothing to spend money on. And because he was not much of a drinker and didn't smoke and gamble, my dad was able to save up $8,000. And that's what he used for the down payment on the West Salem newspaper. Later, Donald purchased and ran the Bangor Independent and merged the papers into the La Crosse County Countryman. The paper is now known as the Cooley News. Gail graduated from the St. Francis School of Nursing in La Crosse in 1945, and she served as a supervising nurse at Mulder Healthcare Facility, West Salem, Sarepta Home, and St. Michael's Nursing Home in Sauk Center, Minnesota, and Pine Villa in Melrose, Minnesota. Donald passed from us on July 21, 2005 at the age of 90. Gail survived and passed in November of 2017 at the age of 93. One other thing I'd like to share from the letter from Harry Griswold: gave my dad a lot of credit for taking the risk of buying the paper back in the days when it was the tail end of the Depression. At 57 years old, He later found out he would buy a paper in Sauk Center. His formative years were during the Depression, and he was not in any way financially reckless, but he loved the newspaper business so much that he took that risk and took all the money from the paper sale in West Salem, and instead of retiring, made a down payment on the new paper in Sauk Center, Minnesota, who probably financed about $75,000 and the renting of the building. The Sauk Center paper was a beautiful paper and still is. Is there anyone from the Griswold family here with us today who'd like to come forward at this time? Okay. Our next enshrinee is Patrick S. Korten of the Badger Herald. For those of you who know, the Badger Herald is a university newspaper, not a community newspaper. Appeals to a different community than our physical communities, a community of students. Patrick S. Korten was born March 17, 1948 in Neenah to Margaret and John S. Korten. He was a founder and the first editor-in-chief of the Badger Herald, an independent student newspaper created in 1969. That date might ring a bell to us. It was a time of turmoil. And it was a response to the then radical campus and other campus newspaper, the Daily Cardinal. Korten ensured the Herald maintained editorial independence through advertising sales, refusing university money and gaining support and donations from popular conservative figures such as William F. Buckley. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in political science, he worked from 1975 to 1981 as an anchor and reporter for WTOP News Radio. It was the CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C. He left broadcasting to join the Reagan administration, where he was Director of Policy and Communications at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. That was during the years from 1981 to 85. He later was Deputy Director and Director of Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of Justice until 1988. He later worked as a media trainer and consultant from 1989 to 2000. Patrick also served as Deputy Vice President for Communications at the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America from 95 to 96. He was Vice President of Communications for the Cato Institute from 96 to 99, and Vice President for Communications at the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty from 99 to 2004. Patrick served as a Senior Vice President of the Supreme Council of the Knights of Columbus from 2004 to 2014, when he retired. He died March 29, 2018 in Fairfax, Virginia, after suffering a stroke at the age of 70. He was survived by his wife of 44 years, Anita, his sons Brian, Sean, Patrick, John, and a sister, Jean, and one granddaughter, Erin. Is there anyone here today from the Korten family? Well, then it is with great pride and honor that we enshrine the name of Patrick S. Korten on the WNA Pylon. Our next enshrinee is Dolores Ninnemann from the Campbellsport News. Dolores was born September 10, 1935 in Wausau to Rufus and Agnes Zimmerman. She married Gerald Ninnemann on September 4, 1954 at Zion Lutheran Church in Wausau. In 1974, Gerald and Dolores purchased the Campbellsport News, and in 1979, Dolores joined Gerald in running the paper. She was a member of St. John's Lutheran Church, New Fane, and the Altar Guild. She served on the board of the Mid-Wisconsin Federated Library System and was a member of Campbellsport and 6 Districts Women's Clubs, where she served as president. She was also a member of the VFW Auxiliary and is a Girl Scout leader, and she was on the town of Ashford's election board. Dolores enjoyed her bridge clubs and sheephead groups, playing music for church programs, gardening, reading, and picking raspberries for family and friends. She passed away on March 14, 2017 at Shorehaven Lutheran Home in Oconomowoc at the age of 81. She is survived by her daughters Beth and Robert Grossmeyer of Waukesha, Faith Kruger of Campbellsport, her son James Ninnemann and Carol, And grandchildren, William Grossmeyer, Catherine Knowles, Joshua Grossmeyer, Jessica Samfier, Anthony Ninnemann, Jeremy Kruger, Sarah Kruger, Samantha Kruger, and Matthew Ninnemann, Joseph Ninnemann, and Stephanie Grandlick, and then 10 great-grandchildren besides, and many nieces and nephews. Is there a member of the Ninnemann family that would like to come forward at this time? Jim, it's my honor and privilege to enshrine your mother on this pylon. Your dad is here already.
Yes.
Didn't mention in the presentation, but Dolores' husband is on the pylon already. He was previously enshrined. So the Ninnemans have a place in this place.
On behalf of the family, I'd like to thank you for this honor. 5 years ago, we were here for Dad, and I didn't realize it at the time. My mother had a long battle with Alzheimer's, and she shared many different stories. At the end, she started to revert back to when she was a teenager. She shared many different thoughts and stories with different people, not all of us. But at that time, she had mentioned to her brother that someday she was going to be on this wall. It was very important to her. So we're glad to be here. At this point, I'd like to point out with everybody here, we're all somewhat in the same boat. The newspapers, especially small community newspapers, are like another child. And in a lot of cases, when you look at children of the families that own newspapers, there's animosity there. Just like there's the favorite child, whether it be the baby in the family or the oldest, the newspaper ends up being the favorite child in every family. And you devote your life to it as mother and father, and the other kids eventually devote their lives to it too. In our family, my dad was the boisterous one that was out front, and my mom was the tiny one that was sitting behind the desk that you didn't want to piss off. As I look back now, you knew she meant business. She was on the Mid-Wisconsin Federated Library Board, which covered 5 different counties. She was involved with the construction of a new library in Fond du Lac. She's from tiny Campbellsport, a community of 2,000. And she was directly involved with the construction of a new library in West Bend and an addition to the library in the city of Fond du Lac. And had a lot of input in that because she brought some common sense, small town common sense, to keeping those things reined in as far as the costs. And if you ever wondered whether you had gotten her angry, you could find, or you knew when she would give you the finger, as I like to refer to it, and the finger was this. When she whipped that out of the holster and started doing that to you, you knew you were in trouble. Not to get political, but the only other story I thought of is toward the end, the last couple of years of her life, when she had entered and look at me, memory care. I guess I'm headed there, but a memory care unit. She was with a number of the other ladies when I went to visit her, and she asked me, "What's going on out there?" She said, "You get to go. You're on the outside. You get to see what's really happening. We're all locked in here." She said, "What's going on out there?" And I said, "Well, it looks like it's going to be between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump." And one of the ladies at the table went, and somewhat prophetic with what you saw that the country went through leading up to the election and post-election. It's interesting when I look back how clear, in some ways, their memories were going, but how clear of mine they still were about some things. So, Beth, do you want to say anything?
You did a great job.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like
So,
Mom, I'm to the side.
yes. So I appreciate the award. She would have been very proud. She's glad she's actually on the same side of the memorial there with Dad, so she would have loved that. Thank you.
I've never heard of giving the finger that way before. I was expecting something a little different, and yours is a lot better. Thank you. Our next enshrinees are a husband and wife pair, Clifton and Shirley Sager from the Villager. Clifton, Cliff G. Sager, was born March 29, 1917 in Chicago to George and Helen Sager. 2 years later, on November 23, 1919, Shirley Sager was born in Cedar Grove, Wisconsin, to Adolph and Lena Stodick. The two married on August 21, 1940 in Yuma, Arizona. We're already getting all the way around the country here, aren't we? Clifton and Shirley owned and published The Villager in Cedar Grove for 15 years. They were also journalists for various television and radio stations. She helped to produce educational films for the state of Wisconsin. As a young man, Clifton moved to Milwaukee, where he graduated from Milwaukee Bayview High School in 1935, then from Carroll College in 1940. In addition to filmmaking for the state of Wisconsin, Clifton made films documenting the construction of the Hancock Building in Chicago and spent 10 years there creating other industrial films. Shirley was a 1937 graduate of the Wisconsin Memorial Academy in Cedar Grove. In addition to her newspaper career, she worked for the Sheboygan County Chamber of Commerce as a visitor guide and served as the local historian and tour guide in the Cedar Grove area. She enjoyed photography, reading, writing, history, travel, pottery, doll collecting, gardening, cooking, and just plain being with people. Clifton died January 12, 2012 at Cedar Grove Gardens. He was 94. Shirley passed at the age of 97, February 23rd of 2017, also at the Cedar Grove Gardens. Shirley was survived by one daughter, Diane Nielsen of New Mexico, 4 grandchildren, son-in-law, and many nieces and nephews. And in addition to her husband, she was preceded in death by 2 daughters, Suzanne Hoffman and Barbara Sager, and 1 grandson, Tom Hoffman. Is anyone from the Sager family here with us today? And it is with great pride and honor that we enshrine the names of Clifton and Shirley Sager on the Wisconsin Newspaper Association pylon. Our next enshrinee is Russell H. Steele of the Forest Republican. In 1967, Russell H. Steele and his wife Arlette began a 36-year publishing career and editing at the Forest Republican. They fulfilled their dream of owning a weekly community newspaper and worked together without ever missing a deadline. They worked through many advances in newspaper production technology. Initially, they printed the paper by letterpress, then using a linotype machine and hand-fed cylinder press that was only able to print 4 pages at a time. They saw the change to offset printing and eventually to computers before selling the newspaper in 2003 to enjoy their retirement and spend time traveling and with their families. Russell was born August 26, 1935 in Ladysmith to Harold and Florence Steele. He graduated from Ladysmith High School in 1953 and 2 years later joined the U.S. Army. He attained the rank of sergeant and was discharged in 1958, which was the year he married his sweetheart, Arlette Goldsmith. Soon after their marriage, the couple moved to Minneapolis, where Russell enrolled in the printing trades program at Dunwoody Institute. And that program was followed by a 6-year apprenticeship, mainly while working at the Reedsburg Times Press, which earned him the status of journeyman printer. After his time in Reedsburg, Russell worked at the Cornell Courier and the Wisconsin Rapids Daily newspaper before moving on to Crandon. Russell passed away July 2, 2017 at St. Mary's Hospital in Rhinelander after a battle with COPD at the age of 81. Russell was survived by his wife, Arlette, his son, Mark Topsom, his daughter, Catherine Springer and Peter, St. Germain, Wisconsin, his grandchildren, Lindsay, Nora, Reed, Hoop, and Madeline, and great-granddaughters Cassidy, Evelyn, and Kylie. He was survived by brothers James from Hudson, Wisconsin, and Michael from Chippewa Falls, and sisters Carol Clay of Menominee Falls, and Linda Jacobs of McQuantico. I know there are many members of the Steele family here, and Arlette, I know you're with us today. Would you please come forward?
I do have a couple of things to say. When Russ got out of the Army in '58 and came home with an engagement ring in his hand for me, my father, who is a veteran newspaper man, Ralph Goldsmith, decided he needed some kind of job to do to support his daughter. So he said, learn to operate a linotype and you'll always have a job. Some of you know how that turned out. But Russ did go through the printing, the whole business that it took to become a printer then, with the apprenticeship and everything, and of course that's long disappeared. But both of my parents, my dad Ralph Goldsmith and my mother Lois Goldsmith, are already on the pylon, so I'm sure that it's Russ would be very proud to join them here in this beautiful grove. He loved Trees for Tomorrow. He loved coming here, and in the early days he did work on the press for us. Those work days were very important to him. And even though he didn't often see the fellows that he would come and gather here with every year, he made some good friends here. And he talked often about the fish boils that they had at one time, the steak fries. It was always about the food and the companionship and the running from one place to another, which became traditional in Eagle River among the fellows. And the one thing he didn't really care too much for was when they added the women to the mix. He definitely thought it should be a good old boys get together. And another thing he was never really sure that he liked was when they added the daily newspapers. And if there are any here, please don't take offense, because I think he learned to love them too. But weekly newspapers were his life and his love. And WNA was so important to us as young publishers. They were so helpful in getting us started, and when we had questions, which we had many of, they were right there to help us. And through WNA and NNA, we were able to visit some wonderful places, hear amazing speakers, learn about the craft of our newspaper work. And so we really appreciate that organization, WNA. It does so much for us. We really need to applaud them. So I guess that's about all I have to say today, but I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad to be invited today. And I see some of you who went with us to Germany when we went on the press tour, the German Discovery Tour. What other small business people get an opportunity to get an inside look at another country? We were treated very well there, and we had a lot of fun, and it was all due to WNA and NNA membership. So happy for that. Thank you very much.
Indeed, we've heard stories of blood families and of newspaper families today, all of us connected through this industry. All of us connected. I think the old joke goes something like, when a bartender makes a mistake, he drinks it. When a doctor makes a mistake, he buries it. But when a newspaper publisher or editor makes a mistake, it lasts in print forever. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not the mistakes of newspapering. These are memories of great people who did great things in their communities because of their connections through the newspaper. And here they are in print forever, to be remembered, to be honored, to be appreciated, and to be loved for all they have contributed to this Wisconsin Newspaper Association. Each one of them a tall tree in their own community. Each one of them someone we look up to for their accomplishments and their achievements. and each one of them we look up to for all the good that they have done. Let this be an inspiration to us all to be that kind of tall tree in our community as we go back to the papers that we are part of, remembering that we are loved as we work in our communities by the greater newspaper family we're all part of. Blessings and peace. Thank you.